Hello everyone, and welcome to the second lecture for chapter 11. And in this lecture we're going to take a look at what led to the beginning of the Russian Empire. So we're really going to kind of focus on the Vikings coming in to Eastern Europe, as well as the establishment of the Kievan Rus and how that leads to Russia becoming the Russian Empire and the Russia we somewhat know as today. So let's get started. Whoops. To understand Russia, its history, you need to understand the geography of it, specifically the European part of Russia. So the region that we consider ourselves as for this part is all of Russia that's west of the Urals, and that's what you would the Ural Mountains are kind of the break between Europe and Asia. And then between the land between the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea. So kind of look in that box there. So if you take this part of Russia and look at it, it's kind of distinctly broken up between north and south geographic features. In the south, it's a very hilly, rolling plain like grassland area, kind of like a breadbasket region. In the north, you have very dense forests. It's typically more flat and can be very swampy because you have rivers their confluence of rivers are starting there in many different places. Now, there are tons of long, giant rivers in Russia. Mostly though, they're slow and they're pretty interconnected. So that's a very important feature here going forward, as we'll talk about, because it allows easy travel throughout this region, because you can go down one river. If you have to move, you can ford pretty easily, and there's a river, another major river pretty close to you. And there's three groups of people that you need to understand the birth of Russia and what we're talking about here in this section. It's the Slavs, the Rus, and the Vikings. All right, so let's go. So the Slavs and the Vikings, they're intertwined in their history within Russia. So in 862, what ends up happening is there's a Viking chief. His name's Rurik. He comes from Sweden and founds the city of Novgorod. Now this is going to be the main kind of principality kingdom that's going to gain some power in the northern part of Russia in this region. And then in 880, Oleg sails down south, particularly on the Dnieper River, and founds the city of Kiev, the modern-day capital of Ukraine. All right, so you have these two very significant cities that are founded really by Vikings, okay? And they're going to intermingle over time with the Slavs in these two areas, particularly in Kiev. And what this ultimately allows them to do is it allows them to establish a power structure in this region, and eventually, because the Vikings are very well known for their sailing and their maritime exploits, they're going to make their way down the Dnieper River all the way to the Black Sea, across the Black Sea down to Constantinople. So the Vikings are going to come in contact with the Byzantine Empire, like we talked about in the last section, and they're ultimately going to attack the city a couple of times, and this is one of those attacks that we talked about in terms of why Constantinople was under threat several times. A few of the times it came from the Vikings. Now, Kiev eventually is going to grow into this great principality, and the mixture of Vikings and Slavs here is much greater than what you see at Novgorod, so that's going to blur the lines. And ultimately, this is going to be where your Russian people are going to develop. So Kiev is going to become a Christian community, kind of like what we talked about at the very end of the last lecture, where the Byzantines were sending Eastern Orthodox missionaries like Cyril and Methodius. These efforts lead to Kiev adopting the Christian faith. And they do so in 957 when their princess Olga converts the community to Christianity. Her grandfather, Vladimir, is going to send out teams of men to kind of view all religions in the area. You can look at this on page 308 in your textbook and further kind of gain an understanding of, okay, what is going on with these religions? What are the traits that we like? Again, people are adapting things and trying to have them function within their lives. and within their communities. So that's one reason why Orthodox Christianity is going to be different than what we talked about in the last section with Western Christianity or Roman Catholicism. So what this does is it not only leads to a closer connection with the Byzantine Empire, because they have a common religious connection now. It's going to lead to better trade and so forth with them, as well as others in the area that convert to Christianity. Now, in 989, all citizens within Kiev themselves are baptized to the Christian faith. So it's a completely Christian area, whether you're a Viking or a Slav, and so forth. Now, in Kiev, they utilize the practice of being both the leader of both the church and state. The leaders do. Now, this is important because this is a feature that they get from the Byzantines. Because remember, back in the last lecture, we talked about who was both the political and religious figure? The emperor. So this is a connection you can see, or diffusion or blending of cultures that we're seeing between Kiev and the Byzantine Empire here. All right, this is a very famous piece of artwork in Russia. It's called the Millennium of Russia, and you can see a lot of important founding figures that are on this. In particular, Rurik, who I believe is right here, the founder of Novgorod, is on this, as well as many other figures as well. You guys should take a look at it. A very beautiful, ornate structure. All right, so let's move on and talk about Kievan Rus, or the Kievan Russia. This is going to become an important empire in this area of what we would consider, they're going to control areas of like Russia, Ukraine, Poland, and so forth. The Kievan Russia is going to grow because of these Byzantine connections. It's going to stretch all the way from Poland to near the Black Sea. One of their most significant rulers is Yaroslav the Wise. He was fantastic for several reasons. One, he was able to establish alliances with the West through marriage. So either that did two things for him. One, it either brought more land in to the empire, or two, it established greater connections and relations with other peoples, other empires or kingdoms to the west, so they had more trade or more cultural contact or what have you. Just like Justinian in the Byzantine Empire, Yaroslav the Wise sets out and creates a really well organized defining legal code. This one's specifically more on property rights, but still very defining. Under his rule, it establishes the first library in Kiev, so it helps focus the city to become an intellectual center, and Christianity prospers under him. There's over 400 churches that are built during his rule, so Christianity really takes off within the rule of the Kievan Russian Empire. Here you can see what the Kievan Russian Empire looked like, what areas it controlled. Now, I want to go back to the geography. Remember I talked about how the rivers were pretty well connected, pretty close together. Look at how close these are. It's not very far to get to these different rivers, and you can sail for long periods of time, whether you go down the Volga River and get into the Caspian Sea, the Don River to kind of get into the Black Sea, as well as the Dnieper and so forth. So it's easy to transport things and move down these rivers, particularly the Dnieper River here to Constantinople. Here's Kiev, and you have important cities like Smolensk and so forth, and Novgorod as well. All right, so here, just to kind of lay out those routes I was talking about, you can see those routes. This is the important one to understand from Constantinople to Sweden, because remember, the Russian states themselves are going to get started by that mixture of Vikings and Slavs to create this people known as the Rus, or Russians, that we know today. And you can see just how you can easily get connected from Scandinavia down to Constantinople. All right, so Kiev's decline. So in 1054, the same year that you see the split between the Eastern Church and the Western Church in Christian terms, Yaroslav dies. And it leads to a decline in the Kievan Rus. Why? Well, just like we're going to see in chapter 13 with the Frankish kingdoms, the Kievan Rus run their empire or line of succession for the empire by dividing the territory among different sons. Well, why would this be an error? Well, it's an error because, think about it, people are greedy inherently. If you split up the empire into different territories, there's a problem. Two really big problems. One, if you're splitting it up, they could go their separate ways, and really you've just divided an empire into several different pieces. Or two, you can, and this is more kind of what ends up happening, you can cause those rifts of power can lead to one son or a couple of sons ganging up on another to take more territory and kind of push them out. And then off of that, we have the Crusades that begin in 1095. So nearly 50 years later, or just over 40 years later, you're going to have the Crusades begin. And the Crusades are going to disrupt trade, primarily with Constantinople. But you have to also remember, Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire, was trading a lot with Eastern groups. That is going to be disrupted mightily for Constantinople. So they're not getting as much. You have disruption directly between the Kievan Rus and the Byzantines also, and this is going to mean that they're going to lose their main source of wealth. And then you're going to have an invasion from the east coming to them on their doorstep, and that is of the Mongols, which we'll talk about a lot much later in the course. All right. Now, to kind of give you a little bit of background on the Mongol invasions here, so that you're not just sitting there going, okay, what are we talking about? We'll give you a little bit of background. So the Mongols were a very fierce group of nomadic horsemen from the steppes of Central Asia. And kind of think about it in terms of chapter 10, we talked about the Bedouins, how they were nomadic groups of people, very fierce, well known for their loyalty, protection, and military skills. Same thing here with the Mongols. They rise to great power under Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan is actually able to unite a majority of the Mongol clans. And he was very ruthless, very skilled military commander. He would burn and kill everything that was in his way if it decided to stop and try to, go against him. He destroyed Kiev in 1240, and with the destruction of Kiev and the Mongol control of this region, it means that southern Russia is going to be under Mongolian control for the better part of 200 years. Okay, now once he dies and the empire itself splits into what are going to be known as Khanates, the Khanate of the Golden Horde, or what we know as also the Kingdom of the Golden Camp, is going to be the Khanate that actually rules, the Mongolian Khanate that rules over Russia during this period. Here is just a quick map to show you guys and talk about Mongol expansion and see how quick it was. You can see this is Mongolia, kind of the central steppes of Asia here, spreads down into China, all across Central Asia, and then coming into Kievan Russia and the other Russian principalities here, really within just over 10 years. All right, so the Mongol rule in Russia is important to understand why Russia develops later on in the course when we talk about it, why it develops more slowly considering the rest of Western Europe. But that's for a much later time down the line. So the Mongols are important because they tolerated other religions. They had to. They're a small group of people. They were controlling lands that they couldn't control just by themselves. So they had to allow toleration from others so that people would be more open to following their rule. And they didn't have to use force all the time. So Russians were able to freely practice their own customs. That's an important fact, okay, because that helps the rule for the Mongols a lot. Now, there are two demands from the Mongols that are important for you guys to know while they're in Russia. One, they demand absolute obedience. Follow the rules, no problem. Two, huge tributes. The Mongols were really focused on tribute from the people that they conquered, whether it was in the form of gold or silver or goods like grains and so forth. Now, there are several important rulers in Russian society and Russian history that actually worked with the Mongols to help crush revolts against them because they realized at the time, maybe not that they wanted independence, but they also understood they weren't strong enough to create their own states and fight back against the Mongols. One here, Alexander Nevsky, as you can see as the main focus of this painting, was one such leader here in Russia that did that. And because of this rule by an outside group, okay, another group, the Mongols, and their lack of focus, because the Mongols didn't focus on education or advancements in education means that Russia is going to become isolated from the rest of Europe. And ultimately, when we get into the technology race, they're going to fall behind. And it's going to be much harder for them to catch up. So Russia, they're going to break free eventually from Mongolian rule starting within the 1100s. So and kind of the beginning here is when the city of Moscow is founded. And if you look at the city of Moscow or Moskva here on the map, it's important to note that it's near the three big rivers in Russia: the Volga, the Dnieper, and the Don. Well, this is a very advantageous strategic position for this city. Why? Because they have the ability to connect and get to many places all throughout the region just using these three rivers. Now, the first Grand Prince here is Ivan the First. He gains the trust of the Mongols. Now, that's important. Why? For them getting to break free, it's important because by gaining their trust, it essentially allows him to create a power structure in and around Moscow where he can operate kind of on his own without the Mongols really looking over his shoulder. And that allows the beginnings of the Moscow Principality to break free, even though they're working within the control of the Khanate of the Golden Horde. Now, another thing Ivan is able to do is he's able to convince the Patriarch, the leading religious figure in the Russian area, to leave Kiev, the original base of the Christian faith in Russia, to Moscow. So now he's got kind of a political military structure around Moscow, as well as now he has the religious figure with him. So as this goes forward, and moving through the rest of his tenure as Grand Prince and his successors, Ivan the First and his successors used money, the church itself, and war, as well as other tricks to gain more and more control, but while still kind of working within the Mongol sphere. And he's able to kind of create this free area that the Mongols don't really have control over, but he's still working with. Okay? So, eventually what ends up happening is, down the line, Ivan III, over a 43-year period, is going to build the beginning of what we call the Russian Empire that's going to last until 1917. Up until the Red Revolution, or the Russian Revolution. Ivan III is able to take this principality around Moscow, establish an empire, start challenging the Mongols, and he names himself Tsar, or Russian for Caesar, because he calls Russia the Third Rome, with the first two being the first Rome, obviously, and then the second being the Byzantine Empire. So by 1480, Ivan III is able to officially break Russia away from the Mongols after there's this bloodless standoff where the armies line up, and then the Mongols decide it's not worth it, and they decide to go home. And this is important because this means that future czars now are free to expand Russian territory as they see fit, and we're going to get the Russian Empire that we all know from history off of this. Excuse me. All right, and that is the end of the lecture. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll kind of come back to Russia a little bit later in the course. We're going to talk about the Vikings a little bit more as well. Moving forward, we kind of spaced out the Vikings themselves because you have kind of an east and west. We talked about the eastern Vikings here with the Kievan Rus today. We'll talk about the western ones when we talk about the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the development of feudalism in Europe. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and have a good one.